Hey everybody, this is Chuck Rowe from Midwest Studies Group. Thanks again for joining us for another webinar. Today we're going to talk about the importance of getting to know your community before moving forward with a government grant. Joining me today is Vic Jaras, who currently works for the state of Iowa. Thanks for joining, Vic.
Anytime, Chuck.
Now, you've been dealing with government grants for years, both on the grantee side and the grantor side of things.
Uh, about 15 years or so.
A lot of people have experience on the grantee side of things, but you, with the experience of having both, what sort of things did you learn once you became more knowledgeable on the grantor side of things?
Well, one of the things that I think all funders try to look for is, does the potential grantee have the capacity to make the project they proposed come to fruition? Do they have enough resources to make the project happen? Do they have enough staff? What kind of experience set is available so that they can actually make happen what they say they want to make happen in their proposal?
Ways you help educate people on that is in your department, with the Department of Education, you will often have a seminar, or maybe you might do that online now with COVID. But you guys have always been good about giving education on how to write a grant properly.
There's two different things we do. One is an in-depth preparing for it, and then the other one is um, just giving you an overview of the changes that we've made, and some of the new expectations for that year from the feds, and questions and answers. So it's a little more encapsulated.
And for government grants, is it common for each department to have some sort of educational, whether it be an online class or an in-person class on or seminar of how to properly apply for funding?
No, in fact, some states, they just have a pre-recorded webinar that you can listen to them talk for an hour. What we try to do is be helpful to folks.
Well, when you think of common tips that you can give to somebody who's writing a grant, what kind of thoughts come across your head for that?
Well, probably one of the biggest things where I see mistakes in is the budget. Um, Sometimes people ask for way too much money. They'll ask for the maximum just because it is a maximum, and they may not have enough children that they're going to be serving to justify that, and then they might get a little budget reduction. Um, Sometimes what they will do is they don't write for the rubric. There's a rubric in most grants, and they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for, and you need to address all of those points, and then in your narrative, weave them together kind of like a quilt so that everything fits together. Um, One of my biggest suggestions is that you have someone outside your organization read your proposal before you send it in. A lot of times, you're looking at it, and you don't see something that might be missing. Uh, Somebody new comes in and they read that and they say, hey, what about this? This doesn't make any sense to me. You may have left out a phrase that really you should have in there to make sure you get all the points.
So, well, one of the ways that we've talked about before of how things can make a difference has to do with getting more input from your community. How do you find when you compare those grant applications of people that do their homework and talk to people in the community? How do you notice their grants might just feel a little bit different than the ones that aren't doing that?
Well, it comes out in the narrative. They're talking about what they want to do, and everything is fits together very smoothly. You read it and you don't have a lot of questions, and you say, yeah, this makes sense. This is they've got a really good shot, and this is a nice proposal. You should also be planning to make sure you have all your stakeholders involved before you even start to write. That's very important. Sometimes we see stuff put together and they had their meeting a week before they submitted their proposal. And wouldn't you know it, there were gaps.
Well, when you think of people that do their, whether it be evaluations at the end of a grant award, or whether it's getting your homework done before you turn in an application, having third party independent data is always a little bit more powerful and impactful than getting data in house and just doing it yourself. Why does that make such an impact to someone who's reading the grant?
Well, I think that having a less biased uh, viewpoint makes a good case for the grant being viable. If it's just within the organization, what you tend to see is they're going to say whatever the top administrator says, this is what I want you to say. And plus it comes out, grant reviewers are pretty good at picking these things out. It's almost like they're detectives, and they will go through these little missing pieces for clues. And sometimes, it results in a loss of quite a few points.
And so to go along those lines, like we just spoke about, is having an independent party, being able to uh, get some of that data beforehand for the application. When you read that, and then you go visit a place later, could you give an example of a time when maybe you visited a place? You don't even need to name the place, but just a time when you visited someplace and you just saw that narrative just match up so perfectly with what you saw with your own eyes?
I typically have federal statute questions that I have to um, take a look at. And we do have in our rubric a crosswalk that's aligned with the federal statute. So if you are addressing that, you are in effect addressing those federal statutes.
So when people are applying for federal and government grants, I think something that people maybe don't understand is how much work goes into them. Whether it's the time of even writing the narrative, all the way to getting that independent third party to help out with some of the feedback from the community. It takes time. You can't just write this a day before it's due.
Right. I mean, it's a process, and it's also an investment because they may have their own folks that are on their salary, but just like you would pay for a study to say before you do a building, and you'd pay someone, $50,000 for a feasibility study. The more help you get before you apply in the planning and the collaboration stages, the better outcome you're going to have.
You go to a local foundation, there's usually like a board or a committee that look over these things. What does that look like from at a state or a federal level?
Generally, a federal grant has a peer review team that's going to review your grant and provide you a score that'll be the basis of whether or not you get an award.
Well, the thing that I find a little bit funny is that every state grant or every federal grant usually has a go-to person that you could talk to ask for some thoughts.
Mhm.
And so many times people write grants thinking that they know exactly how it should be written. They think they know the answers and they don't take the time to talk to the person. So can you think of over the years of a time when you saw somebody just constantly get one of the lowest scores ever, and then year after year it's just low, 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 and then after listening to some of your advice, they were able to get a much higher score and even get awarded a grant?
Absolutely. I can tell you that we had one group that they applied and got a low score, and I talked with them about it, and I says, yeah, let me take a look at your application. And I read through it and gave them some suggestions, and they applied again next year, and their score was much higher. Still wasn't good enough to get funded. And, we had some more conversations, and then they tried it again. And the second time they didn't get funded. Well, we worked on the same process, and then again, their third time, their score was high enough, and they finally got funded. It's good to see that they didn't give up. It's sad sometimes when a district in need applies, or a community group applies, and they give up after one shot. What you really need to do is find out, you know, where you lost points and address those areas and improve your application the following year.
And that question was a little bit loaded, but it's to make a point that people should really just not forget that it's so important to talk to the contacting and listen to the advice that they give you. So if you're watching this right now, if you get nothing else out of this whole entire thing, just remember, when you talk to your contact, make sure you ask questions, make sure you take the advice, because they're telling you things for a reason. And they would never, ever, ever, right, Vic, ever lead you astray, correct?
Not intentionally.
So,
However, with all things, you know, sometimes the rules change on us midstream, like this COVID-19 is a good example of the rules changing on us.
well, Vic, I really appreciate you joining us today. Great opportunity for people to learn about, government grant opportunities and how to take advantage of resources, and the importance of figuring out what the community, how important it is to figure out what the community thinks of you and your programs before you even apply. So, thank you so much for joining.
Anytime, Chuck. Thank you.
And for everyone else, thank you for joining again. Chuck Rowe, Midwest Studies Group. Catch you next time.